Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden here in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this May garden tour. Now today we're going to take a look around my garden, which is about an acre in size, and it's situated here in Southern Ireland, hardiness zone 9, roughly, or thereabouts, because in Ireland we don't have hardiness zones, but that's what it roughly equates to. And we're going to have a look at what's looking good, at what's in flower, and the work I've been doing recently in the garden, because actually we're in the middle of a drought here, and you may wonder, if you've watched the channel for a while, why I'm complaining about sunshine when just a little while ago I was complaining about the horrible deluge of rain that came coming down and down. We had a really wet autumn, we had a really wet spring, and now we're having a drought. But you know, we gardeners, we have to take with the rough with the smooth. We deal with what we're given. But today the garden is looking good, and I hope you'll enjoy it with me. So let's get on with the video. Today is a lovely sunny day, and just before we get on with the garden tour, a big shout out to Paradise Found Garden Tours from Georgia in the States. And I just had a visit from that group. Now, wonderful, wonderful group. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your stay in Ireland. Okay, so the garden tour, and I suppose the first thing to note is the display here behind me, which is right in front of my front door. And those of you who've returned from watching videos before will recall that I had tulips here not very long ago. Well, tulip time has passed, and it's now time for the lilies. Now, as you can see, I have regal lilies that are just coming into flower. And behind them, this gorgeous, gorgeous azalea bush that is just finishing. But isn't it just a stunner? And I did buy it with a specific spot in mind for the garden, but more on that as we go round. These lilies, of course, were bought a few years back when I made that original video about potting up lilies and growing them in pots. And this is their second year in the pots. But they have grown so tall, just fantastic. So in a second we're going to enter into the garden through one of those arches, but just a quick pan first. And the laburnum tree was absolutely magnificent this year, just finishing up now. I don't know, can you believe that all of this drive was swept just yesterday? Every single speck of yellow was gone, and now look at it again today. And through the arch we go. Some regersias are looking really good at the moment, especially this cool one with the red flowers. Just beyond my gargoyle here, Dr. Acula, you can see some of the planting that I put in. Well, it was just earlier on this year, and it's still looking good. I really can't believe how long this yellow spire has been flowering for. It always looks a bit dog-eared. Some bits are brown, some bits look like they're going over, but it has flowered for such a very long time. Asphodeline it's called, and I just think it's brilliant for this time of year. Just at the end of this path we have the pastel border with the wheel right in the middle of it, and the rhodos, of course, are still proving their worth. Now, I did do a bit of planting here right in the middle where I removed a horseradish, and I put in some dahlias and some lilies. This is my variegated horseradish, which I think makes a wonderful ornamental plant, and it's looking great. There had been a second plant next to it which I took out because some scotch grass got into the centre of it, and it was just the easiest thing to do. And over here on the right are some tiger lilies that I grew from seed a little while ago, and this is them planted out, and I think they're actually going to flower this year for the first time. I love this double geranium. It's a real stunner. It does need a bit of staking, but it's certainly worth it for these fantastic flowers. And here behind us is the path we just walked down. So let's just move on over here a bit, and I suppose I should tell you that the boxes, the box topiary that I treated for box blight earlier on in the year, seems to be growing back, so fingers crossed that the treatment will work. Over here we have a bit of my long border, which is looking quite leafy at the moment. The Astilboides, which is that big green leaf on the left, is looking super. Hasn't been affected by the drought yet, but hopefully we'll get a bit of rain soon, we can hope. And then to the right we have Cardiocrinum. We have two Cardiocrinum that are on the cusp of flowering. In fact, they are flowering, they're opening as we speak. And these are the giant Himalayan lily that I moved. It's one that takes 7 years to flower, but when it does flower, it produces offsets which can then be divided and will take a much shorter time to produce blooms. The one on the right there has more open flowers than the one on the left. And the scent, oh, such a beautiful lily to have. Look at the thickness of those trunks, the stems. They're just like really meaty, and with a bit of luck they hold your plant up so you don't have to stake them at all. So I'm delighted that these are opening, and I'm happy that they enjoyed this position that I put them in. You can see that their heads are actually in sun, but down below it's shady, it's kind of dappled shade, and they seem to like that. They also have space to thrive. And down by the feet of the Cardiocrinum we have a few plants that are looking well. There's the Chatham Island Forget-Me-Not just there on the right, but what there is very noticeably is a beautiful white Roscoa over here on the left. Now, Roscoas are hardy gingers, hardy in my climate anyway, and they're closely related to Cattleya. This one is an early flowerer and it is just cute. I love how it has really short stems, so it's down at ground level and you really have to get down there and check it out because it is a little beauty. And over here is what I fondly refer to as my long border, and it's punctuated by clipped euonymus, which is that yellow bush there, and it is coming into flower, so it's not quite there yet, but hopefully in a week or so. And here's a great spot to have a sit down and a cold drink really on this kind of day. It's not a day for tea at all. Here's a shot just behind that border where things are really quite shady. And yeah, it's a good spot to be, I'd say, since it's so hot here at the moment. And we have irises in flower, like this one that's called Dance the Night Away, and it's very flouncy and girlyish, but I still like it. And here's a quick shot of my blue-bearded irises, which I divided last year, so they haven't flowered very well this year, but the ones that are in flower are really lovely. And this is a very old one that I'm delighted to still have. And time to travel a bit further up the garden. And down here, through another little side path, you can see hostas and Martican lilies and grasses. So let's go and have a look at the intersectional peonies. And here's the bed with some of my intersectional peonies. I tend to have favoured yellow in here, but the star of the show is the one known as Bartzella. Now, intersectional peonies, of course, are crosses between tree peonies and herbaceous peonies, and they have as their advantage that they hold themselves upright without staking, which is a definite bonus. But I guess perhaps some of the softness of the flowering has been lost, in that I think they resemble more tree peonies, the blooms do, than herbaceous ones. But they do have really enormous blooms, show-stopping blooms, and the fact that those are held aloft without mucking around with stakes is a definite plus. I'm quite happy with how this border has turned out, but one thing I will change is that the lavender, which is directly in front of us just there, I'm going to remove it because, yeah, it's not doing great. And I think perhaps another intersectional peony in pastel colours would look amazing there. I know, any excuse to buy another plant. And at the feet of the magnolia tree we have another Roscoa in flower. This one's called Q Beauty, I believe. And here we have my Sarracenia planters. So these are the American insectivore plants that are hardy outdoors for me, and these are planted in bog planters and they're coming along nicely. Although it's been so dry, I do feel that I should give them a drop of water. And now let's walk up here past the penstemon on the left. And this penstemon is really looking electric at the moment. I love the combination of the almost proper blue and the pink. It's a fantastic one. And past the Pacific Coast irises on the right. And these irises have done so well for me. It's an enormous clump now, and every year I say to myself, I really need to divide those before they start dying out in the middle, and it hasn't really done that. So I get a surprise every year when they burst into flower, and it's still a great show. And just here we have my Pseudoentera bush that was recently clipped, and yeah, great shrub for acid soil. And just behind it we have a combination of Alstroemeria and Chrysanthemum, and these Alstroemeria seem to be doing really quite well in dappled shade, which is unusual. Calycanthus Hartledge wine is doing great. Lots of pretty flowers this year, and I think they look really well against the dark foliage of the Acer behind them. And here's my stone table, which is shaded with a couple of big leaf plants that are looking great, including Trachycarpus fortunei. And I've just put a little pot of Rhodohypoxus here on the table just to kind of brighten it up a bit. It's not a great place for it though, because it does need watering. But behind we have Astilboides, which is one of my favourite large leaf plants, and they're looking great at the moment, although I do imagine that very shortly they're going to be drooping because of the lack of rain. And you can see Trachycarpus fortunei just behind it with its large flower plume. So now let's leave behind the stone table and have a sweep over here past the woodland border, which is that little path there, to an area that is interesting at the moment because of what happened last winter. Apologies for the table in the background, but as I mentioned, we've just had a gardening group and that's where we had the refreshments. Well, last winter I had a loss, and it was the tree that sits in here among the irises, the Olearia tree, and it is no more. So I didn't want to pull it out because it would destroy the irises around it and I'd lose display. So I just cut off the branches to just make it look a bit more presentable. And it has just opened up this whole corner, made it much more, given it much more light. And considering I had a few peonies in there, it just seems so much better with the extra light. Now, I did buy a shrub to put in this very spot here, and it was the azalea that you saw at the front door. And it's a very upright azalea or rhododendron, which would have looked great in this spot. But now, looking at it, now I'm thinking, actually, I don't want to shade off the area anymore. I think I'll just put the azalea, the rhododendron, somewhere else. Now, I do have two very reliable herbaceous peonies here behind where those irises are, and they flower regularly every year despite the low light. I'm just wondering if perhaps I should move one of them over to that spot where the lavender currently is, near the intersectional peonies, because they flower at the same time. What do you think? Should I move one of these over there? And here we are beside the greenhouse where this border is. I suppose it started flowering, but there's a lot to come yet. And this geum in front of me is really stealing the show. It's such a wow one. I think this is my favourite geum. Yeah, I think this one is my favourite one. Now, the tree stump there on the right, the base of it is pretty much covered by the clematis. It's doing well, but next year you will expect to find that the clematis has gone up the finger and should have closed the whole structure completely. It's important for the first few years to keep the clematis low, to fill in the space below, because if it goes up too quickly, it's never going to come down again. And guess what? I pruned my Daphne. Yes, Daphne Jacqueline Postel. I was brave and I got out the loppers and I pruned the top off because it was just getting too tall. It looked disproportional against the size of the glass house next to it. Now, it was difficult to find information on how to prune the Daphne because any information in the RHS said that minimal pruning required, which didn't really answer the question of what if you want to make it shorter. So anyway, given that this is an evergreen, I decided to wait until spring, really, like after all danger of frost had passed, before taking the top off it, and now I've done it. So hopefully it'll be grand and hopefully it'll flower again as usual next year, because this thing, oh my goodness, when it's in bloom, it is magnificent. Over here we have the wedding cake tree, Cornus controversa variegata, looking great against the copper beech hedging. And just over here we have the contorted hazel. This is a dark leaf variety where I've hung up this little kind of a wind ornament that my daughter gave me last year, and I think it looks great here, kind of subtle against the dark leaves of the hazel. And the glass house has been sorted out for the summer, the bubble wrap taken down, all the plants taken out, and it's been cleaned, well, as best as I could, considering that the border to the right of it was burgeoning with plants that I didn't want to break. And I think maybe next week I'll give you a greenhouse and glass house tour, because I know there are some of you who'd like to see how the plants in there are doing. And here over on the left, which borders the farmer's field just beyond, I want to show you my hardy orchid bed, because I do have two in flower. And here it is, and you can see that the two little ones at the front are in flower. Now, they are smaller than the ones at the back and seem to flower a bit later, but they're still just so gorgeous. This is of course a purpose-built bed where everything was excavated and the correct mix put back in. And some of you may wonder about the Cypripedium or slipper orchid that I bought earlier on in the year. Well, that's the one there at the back that has finished flowering. over here is my daylily bed. Some of you may remember I planted this quite recently, and I was complaining that last year, its first year, I didn't get a lot of flowers. Well, this year it is full of buds. Okay, let's go over the other side of the garden to see what's in bloom there. So on the other side of the garden we have really just two areas, two and a half. And one of them is this meditative area, which is basically gravel, flanked by a raised bed with succulents in. You can see how I have columns of beech here, kind of in the middle of the frame, and they've been recently clipped. And then just to their right are ones that are equally tall but have been added more recently, so that's why they're very wimpy looking, but they'll grow. And here's the main entrance to the west side of the garden. So it's a straight line of sight from the patio doors in our kitchen, and it's flanked by urns with some pretty planting in. And well, yeah, I mean, things of spring interest. There's that iris again, danced the night away, and yeah, I think it's quite beautiful. The alstroemeria isn't yet in flower, but the roses are just coming. And here we have two roses. The bush on the right is called Celeste, an old Alba rose, and the other one is also single flowering old rose, whose name I don't know, but both smell gorgeous. And the scent here is just absolutely wonderful. Now you can see both are double roses, but the one on the left is definitely more cupped than Celeste, which is on the right. And both are underplanted with Astilboides, that Regersia relative, or what used to be classified as Regersia, which seems to be doing quite well down here. Here is my little pond with plenty of water lilies on it, and then just directly up from it we have a calla lily, which is the white one, and some delphiniums. And delphiniums really are glorious. They have to be staked though. And then further over here you have some different planting, and you'll remember the pink border I planted up last summer, at the end of the summer. Well, that was when I got a whole haul of beautiful pink plants and got rid of hostas that had been in here for many years. Hostas found good use over at the back of the long border, but the pink stuff here is, well, July is its season, so it should be, it should be looking great in July. That, I guess, brings me to the end of this video, a garden tour that had to be made shorter than it should have been because I had guests arrive, but so it goes. I hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know which plants you like or preferred down below if you like, and I will see you on the next video, probably next Sunday, and it'll probably be a greenhouses tour video. Thanks as always for watching. Bye.